Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Nara Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome for this Bhagavatam class. Just give me 1 minute and I will share the screen with you all. We completed the 20th shloka from the 10th chapter and we are on to the 21st shloka. Yeah. So, if you see so far, in this particular, what we are seeing, we saw the 10 characteristics of the Puranas, we saw the Sarga, the creation of the Virat Roop, and then Shukdev Goswami is answering the question to Parikshit Maharaj is his answering to Parikshit Maharaj's questions, that how did all these, how the universe became manifested from the universal form, and many other questions also he'll be answering. So we try to understand how the creation procedure takes place. From the 17th shloka we saw that if the Lord desires to eat, then he has gross sense organs, then there is the subtle sense organs, then you have the sense devatas, then you have the tanmatra, the bodily activity that takes place. So we were at the 20th shloka and we are supposed to move at the 21st shloka. So Yadatmani Niralokam Atmanam cha Didrikshataha Nirbhinnehi Akshini Tasya Jyotish Chakshur Gunagraha. So today we don't have His Grace Lakshminarayan Prabhu and Sushil Prabhu. There is some renovation work going on at their place. Anu Prabhu, please do the honors of reading the translation and purport both.
Translation. This, when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see himself and all that was created. Then the eyes, the illuminating God's Son, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. Purport. The universe is by nature dense darkness, and therefore the total creation is called tamas, or darkness. The night is the real feature of the universe, for then one cannot see anything, including oneself. The Lord, out of his causeless mercy, first desired to see himself and all the creation as well, and thus the sun became manifested. The power of vision for all living entities became possible, and the objects of vision were also manifested. This means that the whole phenomenal world became visible after the creation of the sun.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So then, if the Lord wants to understand himself through the Vedic sound, then, he has these ears, then the Dig Devtas are there, and the stotras are there, the subtle sense organs are there. Bodhamanasya rishibhir atmamanastyaja त्यजस्जिगृहीक्षतः कर्णौ च निर्भिद्यते निर्भिद्येते निर्भिद्येताम् Disha Stotra Guna Graha. Rupa Mataji, please read the translation and purport both.
Hare Krishna. By development of the desire of the great sages to know the ears, the power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self. Purport. As stated in the Bhagavad-gītā, by advancement of knowledge, one should try to know about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum of everything. Knowledge does not mean knowledge only of the laws of nature or physical knowledge, which are working by the direction of the Lord. The scientists are eager to hear about the physical laws working in material nature. They are eager to hear through the medium of radio and television about things taking place far away from them on other planets. But they should know the power of hearing, and the instruments of hearing were given to them by the Lord for hearing about the self or about the Lord. Unfortunately, the power of hearing is misused in hearing the vibrations of mundane affairs. The great sages were interested in hearing about the Lord through Vedic knowledge and nothing more. That is the beginning of oral reception of knowledge. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So then further he says that if the Lord wants to, the Lord desires to experience softness, hardness, heat, cold, light objects, then, there is skin, then there is vayu, then there is touch plus air, like that. Vastuno mrudu kantinya laghu guru voshana asitam jigrik क्षतास्त्वान् निर्भिन्ना तस्यां रोममहीरुहा तत्र चान्तेर्विहिर्वाता त्वचा लब्धा गुणोवृता. Priyanka, please read the translation and purport both.
Yes, Natasha. Hare Krishna. Translation. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body, and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception became prominent. Purport. The physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, softness, are subjects of sense perception, and thus physical knowledge is the subject matter of the touch sensation. One can measure the temperament of matter by touching with the hand, and one can measure the weight of an object by lifting it with the hand, and thus estimate its heaviness or lightness. The skin pores, and the hairs on the body are all interdependent with the touch sensation. The air blowing within and outside the skin is also an object of sense perception. This sense perception is also a source of knowledge, and therefore it is suggested here that physical or physiological knowledge is subordinate to the knowledge of the self, as above mentioned. Knowledge of self can expand to the knowledge of phenomena, but physical knowledge cannot lead to knowledge of the self. There is, however, an intimate relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourished for the skin both as food and medicine, as stated in the third canto. Tvacham asya vinirbinnam vivishur tishnam
Nyam
oshadi.
Oshadi. Oshadi means
Oshadi.
medicine.
Yeah. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hastau ruruhatastasya. So, in this 24th shloka, he says that if the Lord desires to perform some activities, then how will he perform? Then you have hasta, the hands, and then you have, balam, the strength, and then you have the sense devatas, the Indra and all. Hastaururuhatastasya nana karma chikishaya tayostu balavan Indra adanam adanam ubhayashrayam. Priya Tulsiani Mataji, please read the translation and purport both.
Ji Mataji, Hare Krishna. Translation. Thereafter, when the Supreme Person desired to perform varieties of work, the two hands and their controlling strength and Indra, the demigod in heaven, become manifested, as also the acts depend on both the hands and the demigod. Purport. In every item, we can note that profit that the sense organs of the living entities are never independent at any stage. The Lord is known as the Lord of the sense. Thus, the sense organ of the living entities are manifested by the will of the Lord, and each organ is controlled by a certain type of demigod. No one, therefore, can claim any proprietorship of the senses. The living entity is controlled by the senses. The senses are controlled by the demigods, and the demigods are the servant of the Supreme Lord. That is the arrangement in the system of creation. The whole thing is controlled ultimately by the Supreme Lord, and there is no independence either of the material nature or of the living entity. The illusioned living entity who claimed to be the Lord of his sense is under the clutches of the external energy of the Lord. As long as living entity continues to be puffed up by his tiny existence, he is to be understood to be under the stringent control of the external energy of the Lord, and there is no question of liberation from the clutches of illusion, Maya, however much one may declare himself a liberated soul. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then further he says that if the Lord desires to move, then they have legs. Then you have the subtle sense organ as the karma bhir, and then you have the sense devta who is upendra. Gatim jigichyata pado ruruhate abhikamina kam padabhyam yagna swayam havya karma vikriyate nrubhi. So we have only 5 devotees. So back to His Grace Anup Prabhu. Please read the translation and purport both.
Translation. Thereupon, because of his desire to control movement, his legs became manifested, and from the legs the controlling deity, named Vishnu, was generated. By his personal supervision of this act, all varieties of human beings are busily engaged in dutiful occupational sacrifice. Purport: every human being is engaged in his particular occupational duty, and as such activities are visible as men go hither and thither. This is very prominently visible in big cities of the world. People are going all over the cities with great concern from one place to another. This movement is not limited only to the cities, but is also visible outside the cities from one place to another, or from one city to another, by different means of vehicles. Men are moving by cars and rails on the roads, by subways within the earth, and by planes in the sky for the purpose of business success. But in all these movements, the real purpose is to earn wealth for a comfortable life. For this comfortable life, the scientist is engaged, the artist is engaged, the engineer is engaged, the
technician is engaged.
The technician is engaged, all in different branches of human activity, but they do not know how to make the activities purposeful to fulfill the mission of human life. Because they do not know this secret, all their activities are targeted towards the goal of sense gratification without control, and therefore, by all this business, they are unknowingly entering into the deep regions of darkness. Because they have been captivated by the external energy of the Supreme Lord, they have completely forgotten the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and thus they have taken it for granted that this life, as presently manifested under the conditions of material nature, is all in all for enjoying the highest amount of sense gratification. But such a wrong conception of life cannot give anyone the desired peace of mind, and thus, in spite of all advancement in knowledge by use of the resources of nature, no one is happy in this material civilization. The secret is that at every step they should try to execute sacrifices toward the path of world peace. The Bhagavad-gītā 18.45-46 also advises the same secret in the following verses. Sve sakarma abhirataha samsiddhim labhada naraha sakarma niratataha siddhim yata vindate chakshnuhu yataha pravitir bhutanam yanasarvam idam tatam karmana tam abhayacharya siddhim vindati manavaha. The Lord said to Arjun, just hear from me how one can attain the highest perfection in life simply by discharging his specified occupational duty. Man can attain the highest perfection of life by worshiping the Supreme Lord and by performing sacrifice for the sake of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is all-pervading and by whose control every living being acquires his desired facilities according to his personal propensity. There is no harm in having different propensities in life because every human being is proportionately independent to chalk out the plan of his life by different occupations, but one should make it a point in his life to know perfectly well that he is not independent absolutely. One is certainly under the control of the Supreme Lord and under different agencies. Knowing this, one should make it a point that by his work and the result of his labor, he serves the Supreme Lord as prescribed by the authorities expert in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. For performing such occupational duties of life, the leg is the most important instrument of the body, because without the help of the legs, one cannot move from one place to another, and therefore the Lord has special control over the legs of all human beings, which are meant for performing yajnas.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So, then when the Lord desires to have offsprings or children, then you have genitals, and then you have the presiding deities of the sense devatas are, that is Prajapati. So nirmidyata shishno vai prajanandamrutarthina upastata asita kamana priya tadu bhayashrayamaha. Rupa Mataji, please read the translation and purport both.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Thereupon, for sexual pleasure, begetting offspring and tasting heavenly nectar, the Lord developed the genitals, and thus there is the genital organ and its controlling deity, the Prajapati. The object of sexual pleasure and the controlling deity are under the control of genitals of the Lord. Purport. The heavenly pleasure for the conditioned soul is sexual pleasure, and this pleasure is tasted by the genitals. The woman is the object of sexual pleasure, and both the sense perception of sexual pleasure and the woman are controlled by the Prajapati, who is under the control of the Lord's genitals. The impersonalist must know from this verse that the Lord is not impersonal, for he has his genitals, on which all pleasurable objects of sex depend. No one would have taken the trouble to maintain children if there were no taste of heavenly nectar by means of sexual intercourse. This material world is created to give the conditioned souls a chance for rejuvenation, for going back home, back to Godhead, and therefore generation of the living being is necessary for upkeep of the purpose of creation. Sexual pleasure is an impetus for such action, and as such, one can even serve the Lord in the act of such sexual pleasure. The service is counted when the children born of such sexual pleasure are properly trained in God consciousness. The whole idea of material creation is to revive the dormant God consciousness of the living entity. In forms of life other than human form, sexual pleasure is prominent without any motive of service for the mission of the Lord. But in the human form of life, the conditioned soul can render service to the Lord by creating progeny suitable for the attainment of salvation. One can beget hundreds of children and enjoy the celestial pleasure of sexual intercourse provided he is able to train the children in God consciousness. Otherwise, begetting children is on the level of the swine. Rather, the swine is more expert than the human being because the swine can beget a dozen piglets at a time, whereas the human being can give birth to only one at a time. So one should always remember that the genital sexual pleasure, the woman, and the offspring are all related in the service of the Lord. And one who forgets this relationship in the service of the Supreme Lord becomes subjected to the threefold miseries of material existence by the laws of nature. Perception of sexual pleasure is there even in the body of dog, but there is no sense of God consciousness. The human form of life is distinct from that of dog by the perception of God consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Mataji, but in the stories we hear Gajendra Moksha also, where animals also got salvation, right?
Yeah, but in the previous birth, Gajendra was King Indradumna, and he was a very powerful, king, and he did very good devotional service. It was just that he got cursed. For Gajendra, it was a momentarily, you can say atonement, being in an animal's body, but consciousness was full with Krishna. So even if momentarily Gajendra had forgotten, but he had remembered his past birth, like, or in the case of even Maharaj Bharat. Okay, so he was the king in his past birth, and even in his consciousness was developed till the level of bhava. And if you see with Maharaj Bharat also, in a deer's body also he was fully conscious, because he used to go to that ashram and he used to hear Hari Katha and all. So that's how he kept himself intact. And then even in the next birth where he became Jad Bharat, that time also, of course, he got a human form of birth, because he had heard a lot of Krishna Katha, and he was eating only grass, and he was following most of the other, and that is why, if you see, Krishna, when he wants to teach the world, then he will teach us in this way, that though if somebody is fallen down momentarily, but still Krishna gives them the intelligence by which they can come to him, like, that way. So even if a person is in an animal's body, if a soul is in an animal's body, but because of the previous impressions, the consciousness is so developed that he will definitely remember hard at the time of need. The Gajendra, he remembered exactly. Imagine Gajendra had fought for thousands celestial years, okay, with the crocodile. And Gajendra realized that, see, the crocodile is a water animal. So his strength will keep on increasing in the water. And I am a land animal. So in the water, I will succumb, to the strength of the crocodile. And that's where very intensely Gajendra takes shelter of the Supreme Lord. And he remembers his past birth, because only in a helpless condition can we remember the Supreme Lord intensely, without any, this disruptions as such. So then Gajendra remembered immediately his past birth, and what he could instantly offer. He was finding something, what can I, instantly offer to please the Supreme Lord? So he immediately offered the lotus flower, and the Supreme Lord, just being pleased with that one act, immediately, runs from Vaikuntha. In fact, the Lord was, it is said that the Lord was so eager that the Supreme Lord, Hari, he felt that Garuda is flying at a very slow speed. Though Garuda is actually the king of the birds, and he was like, at a very fast speed, but the Supreme Lord, put aside Garuda also, and he immediately came on that scene because of the intensity of the situation. So, if an animal, by the grace of the Lord, he remembers the past birth, but there should be some credit, then only, the Lord can help. If there are no credits, then the consciousness is covered. The consciousness of an animal is not really developed. But yes, as human beings, what we can do is we can help that animal to develop sukruti, like, giving him prasadam or something like that. And in the next birth, he might, become a human being, and, he can execute Krishna consciousness as such. Like, so, so what you are asking, that, okay, Gajanan, but he had a past. He was a king of, he was a very powerful king, and he was completely devoted. Every day he used to chant certain prayers and mantras. So whatever he had done in that birth did not go in vain in an animal's body. In that way.
Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah. Utsi sorry. Utsi srusho dhartu malam निरभिद्यते वै गुदम ततः पयुस् tato mitra utsarga ubhayashrayah. So when the Lord wants to, the Lord desires to expel waste. So then, you have the anus, and the sense devata is Yam and Mitra. Yeah, Priyanka, please read the translation and purport both.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Translation. Thereafter, when he desired to evacuate the refuse of eatables, the evacuating whole anus and the sensory organ thereof developed along with the controlling deity Mitra. The sensory organ and the evacuating substance are both under the shelter of the controlling deity. Purport. Even in the matter of evacuating stool, the refuse is controlled. So how can the living entity claim to be independent? Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
So then, when the Lord desires to change the body, so then he has this navel. Asi srupso purya नाभिद्वारम् अपानतः तत्रापानस्तो मृत्यु पृथक्त्वमुभयाश्रयः. Vignesh, please read the translation and purport both.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Translation. Thereafter, when he desired to move from one body to another, the navel and the air of departure and death were combinedly created. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force. Purport. The pranavayu continues the life, and the apanavayu stops the living force. Both the vibrations are generated from the abdominal hole, the navel. This navel is the joint from one body to the other. Lord Brahma was born of the abdominal hole of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu as a separate body, and the same principle is followed even in the birth of any ordinary body. The body of the child develops from the body of the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint. And that is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself as separated many. The living entities are therefore separated parts, and thus they have no independence.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So then further he says that if the Supreme Lord desires to consume food, then he has the abdomen, and the presiding deity for that is Samudra. Aditsoro Annapananam Asana Kukakshi Antara Nadyah Nadya Samudrascha Tayos Tutishti Pushtistadashraye. Vishal Prabhu, please read the translation and purport both.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare
The
Krishna.
controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries, the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, Mataji, please scroll down.
Yeah.
Therefore, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries, the rivers and the seas. being the controlling deities of the two keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu. And so if the Lord desires to contemplate his Maya and the created objects, then, he has the heart or the Hridayam. In the sense, Devta for that is Chandra. Nidadhyaso ratman Maya Hridayam nirvidyata tato manas Chandra iti sankalpa kama evacha. Vrinda, please read this translation.
Translation: When there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy, then the heart, the seat of the mind, the moon, determination, and all desire became manifested. Purport: The heart of every living entity is a seat of the Supersoul, Paramatma, a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without its presence, the living entity cannot get into the working energy according to his past deeds. The living entities who are conditioned in the material world are manifested in the creation in terms of respective inclinations inherent in them, and the requisite material body is offered to each and every one of them by the material energy under the direction of the Supersoul. This is explained in the Bhagavad-gītā 9.10. When therefore the Supersoul is situated in the heart of the conditioned soul, the requisite mind manifested in the conditioned soul, and he becomes conscious of his occupation as one is conscious of his duty after waking up from slumber. Therefore, the material mind of the living entity develops when the super soul sits on his heart, after which the mind, the controlling deity moon, and then the activities of the mind, namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. The activities of the mind cannot begin without the manifestation of the heart, and the heart becomes manifested when the Lord wants to see the activities of the material creation. Hare Krishna.
So now then you have the creation of the dhatus and the prana and all. Tvak charma mamsa rudhira medo majjasti datavah bhumi api tejo maya sapta prano vyomambu vayubhi. Lipi Mataji, you're there? Lipi Mataji, you're there?
Hare Krishna Mataji, yes, I am there.
Yeah, please read this translation and purport both.
If the sound from the outside, please forgive me because the construction is outside. So I'm just reading.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam everybody. The 7 elements of the body, namely the thin layer on the skin, the thin layer itself, the flesh, blood, fat, marrow, and bone, are all made of earth, water, and fire, whereas the light breath is produced by the sky, water, and air. Purpose. The construction of the little bit down, I didn't finish the first line. The construction of the whole material world is prominently made by 3 elements, namely earth, water, and fire. But the living forces is produced by sky, air, and water. So water is the common elements in both the gross and subtle forms of all material creations. And it should be noted herewith that due to necessity, water being most prominent in the material creation is the principal elements of all the 5. The material body is thus an embodiment of the five elements, and the gross manifestation is perceived because of three, namely earth, water, and fire. Sensations of touch are perceived due to the thin layer of the skin, and bone is as good as hearthstone. The breathing air of life is produced of sky, air, and water, and therefore open air, regular bath, and ample space in which of live are favorable for healthy vitality. Fresh produce from the earth like grains and vegetables, as well as fresh water and heat, is good for the uncake of the grass body. Thank you, Srimad.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I have a doubt. Can I ask?
Yeah. Ask, Prabhu.
In this purport that we just read, it is said that but the living force is produced by sky, air, and water. I was thinking living force to Atma se produce hota hai.
Yeah, but then this pran is made up of sky, water, and air. Prana
Okay.
vayu ko bolte hain na. So that is
Okay.
actually made up of sky, water, and air. So that's why then you have it that way then.
Okay.
Then sorry, just read this and we'll go to the next. So then these senses, they gravitate to the sense objects, and then the sense objects appear very attractive because of false ego. Then the mind sustains all the changes, and the intelligence consists of all the power of discrimination that is there. And this is what has been said in the shloka, is saying that Gunatma Kanindriyani Bhutadi Prabhava Guna Mana Sarva Vikaratma Buddhi Vijnana Rupani. Vigneshwar, please read this translation and purport both.
Yeah. Translation. The sense organs are attached to the modes of material nature, and the modes of material nature are products of the false ego. The mind is subjected to all kinds of material experiences, happiness and distress, and the intelligence is the feature of the mind's deliberation. Purport. Illusioned by the material nature, the living entity identifies with false ego. More clearly, when the living entity is entrapped by the material body, he at once identifies with the bodily relationships, forgetting his own identity as spirit soul. This false ego associates with different modes of material nature, and thus the senses become attached to the modes of material nature. Mind is the instrument for feeling different material experiences, but intelligence is deliberative and can change everything for the better. The intelligent person, therefore, can attain salvation from the illusion of material existence by proper use of intelligence. An intelligent person can detect the awkward position of material existence and thus begin to inquire as to what he is, why he is subjected to different kinds of miseries, and how to get rid of all miseries. And thus, by good association, an advanced intelligent person can turn towards the better life of self-realization. It is advised, therefore, that an intelligent person associate with the great sages and saints who are on the path of salvation. By such association, one can receive instructions which are able to slacken the conditioned soul's attachment for matter, and thus the intelligent man gradually gets rid of the illusion of matter and false ego and is promoted to the real life of eternity, knowledge, and bliss.
So then further he says that, so he's concluding in the next shloka. He says that, okay, I have now explained to you everything about this Virat Rupa of the Lord, that is the gross Virat Rupa of the Lord. And then beyond this gross, form is also the subtle form, which is invisible, which is even without an beginning or an end. And it cannot be expressed in words, or it cannot be felt through mental speculation. And that is why the wise do not accept both these forms of the Supreme Lord, which are composed of matter. So the wise do not accept even the gross form of the Lord or the subtle form of the Lord. So let's see. Etat bhagavato rupam sthulam te vyarthaham maya mahadhyabhis chavaranner ashtabhir bahir avritam. So this is the 33rd shloka, right? And I think we are ending this. No, there's another couple of more shlokas for this section to end. Yeah. Anuprabhu, please read the translation and purport both.
Translation. Thus, by all this, the external feature of the personality of Godhead is covered by gross forms, such as those of planets, which were explained to you by me. Purport. As explained in the Bhagavad-gītā 7.4, the separated material energy of the personality of Godhead is covered by 8 kinds of material coverings: earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All these are emanations from the personality of Godhead as his external energy. These coverings are just like the coverings of clouds for the sun. The cloud is a creation of the sun, yet it actually covers the eyes so that one cannot see the sun. The sun cannot be covered by the clouds. The cloud can at utmost extend a few hundreds of miles in the sky, but the sun is far greater than millions of miles. So 100-mile covering is not competent to cover millions of miles. Therefore, one of the various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot, of course, cover the Lord. But these coverings are created by him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. Actually, the conditioned souls are covered by the illusory creative cloud of matter, and the Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to their eyes, because they have no eyes of transcendental vision, and because they cannot see the personality of Godhead. They therefore deny the existence of the Lord and the transcendental form of the Lord. The covering of the gigantic material feature is accepted by such men with a poor fund of knowledge, and how this is so is explained in the following verse.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. So then he further says that Atha param sukshmatam vyakta nirvisheshanam anadi madhya nidhanam nityam van manasa param. Priyanka, please read this translation and purport both.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Translation. Therefore, beyond this, gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than a finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation and is distinct from the material conception. Purport. The gross external body of the Supreme is manifested at certain intervals, and thus the external feature or form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not the eternal form of the Lord, which has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Anything which has a beginning, interim, and end is called material. The material world is begun from the Lord, and thus the form of the Lord before the beginning of the material world is certainly transcendental to the finest or the finer material conception. The ether in the material world is considered to be the finest. Finer than the ether is mind, intelligence, and false ego. But all 8 of the outward coverings are explained as outer coverings of the absolute truth. The absolute truth is therefore beyond the expression and speculation of the material conception. He is certainly transcendental to all material conceptions. This is called nirvisheshanam. One should not, however, misunderstand nirvisheshanam as being without any transcendental qualifications. Visheshanam means qualities. Therefore, nir added to it means that he has no material qualities or variegatedness. This nullifying expression is described in 4 transcendental qualifications, namely unmanifested, transcendental, eternal, and beyond the conception of mind or word. Beyond the limits of words means negation of the material conception. Unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to know the transcendental form of the Lord. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. So ahead he says that Amuni Bhagavat Rupe Mayate hi anuvar varnite ubhe api na grinati maya shrishte vipaschita. Vrinda, please read the translation and purport both.
Translation: Neither of the above forms of the Lord, as just described unto you from the material angle of vision, is accepted by the pure devotees of the Lord who know him well. Purport: The impersonalists think of the absolute personality of Godhead in two different ways, as above mentioned. The one hand, they worship the Lord in his Vishwarupa, or all-pervading universal form, and on the other hand they think of the Lord's unmanifested, indescribable, subtle form. The theories of the pantheism and monism are respectively applicable to these two conceptions of the supreme as gross and subtle. Both but both of them are rejected by the learned pure devotees of the Lord because they are aware of the factual position. This is very clearly mentioned in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, which records Arjuna's experience of the Vishwarupa of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna.
Yeah. It is Adrishta Purvam Rishto Asmi Drishtva Bhayena Cha Pravyatitam Manmaye Tad Eva Me Darshaya Deva Rupam Prasiddha Deva Sa Jagan Nivasa.
Arjuna, as a pure devotee of the Lord, never previously saw the contemplated universal form of the Lord Vishwarupa. But when he did see it, his curiosities were satisfied. But he was not happy to see such a form of the Lord because of his attachment as a pure devotee. He was afraid to see the gigantic form of the Lord. He therefore prayed to the Lord to assume his four-handed Narayana or Krishna form, which alone could please Arjuna. Undoubtedly, the Lord has the supreme potency to exhibit himself in multifarious forms. But the pure devotees of the Lord are interested in his forms as eternally exhibited in the abode of the Lord, known as the Tripad Vibhuti or Kingdom of God. The Lord in the Tripad Vibhuti abode exhibits himself in two forms, either with four hands or with two hands. The Vishwarupa exhibited in the material manifestation has unlimited hands and unlimited dimensions with everything unlimited. The pure devotees of the Lord worship him in the Vaikuntha forms as Narayana or Krishna. Sometimes the same Vaikuntha forms of the Lord are in the material world also by his grace as Sri Rama, Sri Krishna, Sri Deva, etc. And thus the pure devotees also worship them. Usually, the features shown in the material world have no existence in the Vaikuntha planets, and thus they are not accepted by the pure devotee. What the pure devotees worship from the very beginning are eternal forms of the Lord existing in the Vaikuntha planets. The non devotee impersonalists imagine the material forms of the Lord and ultimately they merge in the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord, whereas the pure devotees of the Lord are worshippers of the Lord both in the beginning and also in the perfect stage of salvation eternally. The worship of the pure devotee never stops, whereas the worship of the impersonalist stops after his attainment of salvation when he merges in the impersonal form of the Lord known as the Brahma Jyoti. Therefore, the pure devotee of the Lord are described here as vipaschita or the learned who are in the knowledge of the Lord perfectly. Hare Krishna.
So, you'll remember once I had explained in this canto also, and even in the very first canto, if you see, that is the, in fact, in this canto, I had explained that what happens for the pure devotee, the sadhana and the sadhya are same. Okay, the devotee does not have to give up anything at any stage, because what he is doing at the first stage, after reaching to the supreme abode of the Lord, or Golok Vrindavan, he is doing those same activities. But with this, Brahmavadis or the Jnanis or, Jnana yogis and all, what happens is that his worship, stops over here only after, he gets salvation. And when he merges into the Brahma Jyoti of the Lord. So his worship, stops over there. So there is no continuation. But with the devotees, it will keep on continuing. What they were doing at the beginning, they will do at the end. And even, just a minute, I'll just show you all that shloka. This was after, I think, Ete Chamsakala Pumsa. This is the 31st. No. Yeah. This is like, 32 and then 33. Yeah. So you see over here, he says that beyond his gross conception of form is another subtle conception of form which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. The living being has his form beyond his subtlety. Otherwise, he could not have repeated births. And then in the next shloka, he's saying that whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and the subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. And that is why devotees don't, devotees of the Lord do not accept only these forms of the Lord, whether they are the gross or subtle, because both these forms are actually composed of matter. So as a homework, what you all can do is you all can read 1.3.32 and 1.3.33. You can read the purport of this. If you all want, I can actually share the link also with you all, so that it becomes easier. You all to just straight click the link and you all can check it out. Fine. So, dear devotees, thank you so much for joining in. So till now, Sarga has been explained. From tomorrow, he will explain Visarga. The secondary creation will be, he'll be explaining the secondary creation, where you will have, the Prajapatis being created, the Manus and the Devatas, and how the modes will permit to give, so many species. Then there'll be maintenance, there'll be destruction, and the Visarga consists of many other things as such, like so. And if you see, this Sarga and Visarga will be again explained in the third canto also. So all this Virat Roop, the Virat Roop explanation itself in the second canto is coming thrice, I suppose. Once in the beginning also we saw, I think somewhere in the middle also, and in the end also we are seeing over here. And the Virat Roop explanation will come even in the third canto also. So why all this Krishna wants to again and again explain from different angles, so that we are convinced, convinced enough that we have to worship only the personal form of the Lord, and we have to be connected only with the personal form of the Lord, and we have no business with the impersonal forms of the Lord or the Virat Roop of the Lord. Initially, it might be, okay, fine, you appreciate nature, you appreciate the mountains, rivers, oceans, and everything. But when you reach at a particular stage, when you reach at a particular height of devotional service, then for us, all that should matter is actually the personal form of the Lord, which is the Sham Sundar form of the Lord. So, dear devotees, thank you so much for joining in. We'll meet tomorrow. Yeah. Hare Krishna, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Mata. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna Mataji.
So, Riyansh, so we don't have the summer camp now. The summer camp is over, beta. And we will
Oh, okay.
We will now meet on next Sunday. I'll announce it on the WhatsApp group, beta. Okay. Adisha.
Okay, for the creative classes next Sunday.
Yeah, I'll speak to all the
Okay.
children. Please be online. Children, dear children, please be online. Some nice announcements I'll make. Adira, beta, please be online. Alka,
My
please be
camera.
online. Kanishka Bujbal, please be online. Okay, children. So we are done with our summer camp, but this summer camp does not halt over here. We will be continuing every Sunday like this only. We'll come up with every Sunday, we'll come up with something different, nice, where you all will see yourself growing in Krishna consciousness also with different activities and all. Of course, we'll not have all the time Krishna conscious activities. We'll have something, some activity which will be included, and we'll have some sloka recitation like how yesterday we played the kartals and we had some nice Vaishnava songs and all. So we'll be having many such activities. But on this Sunday, you all are going to perform, and I will be actually at the spectators' end. And you all can perform anything you all want. You all want to sing Vaishnava songs, you all can sing some Vaishnava songs. You all want to recite shlokas, you all can recite shlokas. You want to dance, you can dance also. You want to say a prayer to the Supreme Lord, you can say a prayer to the Supreme Lord. Anything you desire, you will be performing for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever is your desire.
Is
Okay.
it like a talent show?
Yeah, it's like a talent show.
Okay.
What we did all this, like, see, all these 10 days, what did we do in the summer camp? That all you will be presenting
Okay.
or end. Okay. And whatever previous knowledge also you have, you can present. Adisham Bachcha, you're ready for next Sunday show? Adisham is thinking this summer camp should not get over only, no, till his school starts. Yeah.
Oh, but actually, I don't have school because
Oh,
now
okay.
I'm homeschooling.
Okay. So then we both can meet every day online. Is it okay?
Okay.
You and me can meet every day online. Adisham.
Yeah, and you know, in the class before this, I was actually there for some time.
Oh, really? You like the reading?
Yeah, but it was close to the end. And
Okay.
I noticed that you were on with the base OA, so I just downloaded that on my Google because this is my laptop, so I can really do anything on it.
Okay. 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 Fine. Fine. Okay. So we'll meet on Sunday. I'll announce Sunday, most probably 7:30, because we have some other kids from Bal Bhagavatam class also. I teach, Bhagavatam to the small kids also. So that batch and this batch, I'll combine that batch and we'll have a mega blast. We'll have a, wonderful activities full of, children performing. And yeah, definitely it will be a very nice thing, and I'm waiting for that. I'll be announcing in the group so that your parents come to know. Okay, fine. Adira, okay, beta. Riyansh, okay. Preeti, okay. Okay, fine. Yeah, so I have another class at 9:15 for the Marathi batch. I teach Marathi Bhagavad-gītā also. So we'll meet on Sunday. Okay, children?